Nowhere in the world does the world come together the way it does in New York. The other day, I jumped into a taxi because I was late and I was listening to this Italian fashion podcast. And I tried to lower it because the cab driver, next thing I know, he turns to me and starts speaking to me in Italian. Perfect Italian. A man in his 40s, probably. He was born in Ecuador. He left Ecuador, went to the UK for a while, then lived in Italy, and now is here. And we had a wonderful conversation about our individual immigrant experiences and how we like New York. But that could only happen in New York.
Yeah.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah. We were in the city today on the Lower East Side, and we parked the car, and right next to where we parked the car, there was a couple sitting at the cafe speaking Romanian. We always joke that we are everywhere. Romanians are everywhere. Hello.
Hello, welcome back. I'm Andreea Parc,
And I'm Alexa Dumitru.
and this is Aive Again Podcast, where attorneys and other professionals meet to discuss real life challenges and our decisions that shaped our journeys. Our guest for today is a special lady, very close to my heart, being an author as myself, Gabriela Contestabile. She is an author and the founder of Sue Misura Journeys, a boutique travel group focusing on the artisanal traditions of Italy. She currently partners with Elestra Travel, run by Elena Sisti in Milan, a travel company run entirely by women. And their current project is Fashion in Culture, and it's set in Milan. She's a passionate advocate for social justice, sustaining and supporting the arts, supporting and promoting women and girls, and respecting heritage. Thank you, Gabriela, so much for being here with us. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to meet you both and to get to know both of you better.
As I mentioned, we met at our publishing company, The Three Tomatoes. And you're an author as well. And tell us more about your books.
Well, it's interesting because I love women's stories, and I was intrigued by Andrea's story because that's how we learn where other people are coming from and the various challenges. So for me, women's stories have always been central. My latest book, well, there were a couple of books, but my latest book is a collection of stories about women. I was at home during the pandemic. My mother was very sick, and I was taking care of her. And then there was the thinking when I had to resurrect some old stories of I have to rewrite them within the context of the pandemic. The world changed. And so each story is about a woman in a different part of Italy, just so I can write about Italy, facing a conflict, facing a decision, facing a point where she had to change. Because, we think about the pandemic during that period of darkness, we need to be able to see the stars. And one of the themes in both the two books, my first and the third, came from a quote by Guerlain, the perfumer. And it was, he described the time of day at dusk when the sky has lost its sun and is yet to find its stars. So that's where we were. So I felt that with each character, each woman here, she had to make a decision. She had to change her old views to really reimagine where she was. And, the stories evolve from there. So.
Yeah. It's interesting that we are here in New York, being one of the main capitals of fashion. But as we know, Milan and Europe, actually, they're more. And Alexa, being a fashion designer, she was very excited that you're gonna be joining us, that she can have conversation with you about that.
I so respect your profession, Alexa, and I'm honored to be able to speak with you. and learn from you and applaud you for the choice you've made. Because it's because of my mother. My mother was a seamstress. She was born in Italy to a family of 7 daughters, and they owned a vineyard. And she learned, because my mother didn't want to work in the farms, she wanted something else. So she learned knitwear, and she would make knitwear for people, and she made money that way. And then when we moved to the States, she worked in a factory. She then worked at Elizabeth Arden as a co-check attendant until she was 92. But she so loved fashion, she just learned how to sew, and she would imitate Yves Saint Laurent for me. She would imitate and create these. I don't have her talent. So since then, I have always admired the artisanship, the love, the attention, and the real humanity of fashion and what it brings us. It should be something joyful. It's something we don't have to follow a trend, and I'm speaking too much, but we don't have to follow a trend. We do it out of love and joy and engagement. So good for you.
Thank you. Yeah, coming from Romania, and the honor is mine to speak with you. Coming from Romania, from our family members over there, the word seamstress is almost derogatory. You are being a seamstress means that you are a factory worker. You make things for other people. It's very negative, this word. And when I'm a fashion designer, but just for the pure fact that I sew my designs, it makes me a seamstress. The seamstress in their eyes. Because, right, the definition of a seamstress is someone who creates these beautiful pieces, just as you were talking about your mother.
You're the artist.
Yeah.
You do with your hand.
Yeah.
And I've had this roadblock in Romania because I have to make myself known as a designer and to
Right.
over that roadblock for people. Because even in Romania, designers don't sew. They don't
That is,
just
They just create.
conceptualize.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it brings a lot of people, like, it takes them aback that I do absolutely everything.
that's surprising, but the fact that you do it makes you a better designer.
Right.
Because some of the world's best designers have always known how to sew.
Right.
Unless you're a celebrity and you just put your name on something. But I think Ralph Simmons would also show how he knew where to put the seams, I still remember my mother trying it on me. I would draw pictures of what I wanted, but she was the one who knew what was going to work.
Yeah.
So, and interesting, in Italian, the word sarta is seamstress, sarto is a tailor. So it's interesting that the language, the two are seen on an equal level.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, when we were young, living in the United States, we would go back to Italy every year, and we would go to the Sarta and the Sarto to have our clothes made, because back then it was something affordable for the average family. It was something we just did well, in Romania too, it surprises me because to do with your hands,
Right.
in Italy as well, is something that's very much respected and honored. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and I put a big emphasis. So initially I started by sewing. That's how I started my passion. And then I realized that I'm designing the things that I'm sewing. So it just started growing from there because anybody could pay to get their pieces produced, right? But I put a big emphasis on doing everything myself because I don't want to be wasteful. I don't want to pay some people in a factory whom I don't know, whom I can't control, whom the fashion industry is very wasteful and it's very sad and scary sometimes. And I'm looking into producing some of my pieces, and I think
it's a good idea.
It's so important. I'm looking for places small factories where they do things ethically and beautifully.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to find.
It is really hard to find. I'm just thinking that recently, I have to dig through my notes. I saw something on Instagram that was a woman who wanted to bring the clothing manufacturing back to the garment
I
district
know
where my
what you're
mother was,
talking about.
right? And she seemed to have a much more sustainable, empathic, where you would pay workers a good living wage instead of. So I think there are initiatives, and if you could maybe collaborate with her or get another, I think that's a fabulous idea. If you have that vision
Yes.
to move forward with it, by all means. I'm going to see if I can find her name.
Yeah.
But she seemed very empathic. I was so excited about it. I was talking about it for a day. But I do think, and for instance, a while ago when I was volunteering at Dress for
Mm-hmm.
Success, where we suit women to go for their first job interview, what I noticed is that they didn't have the money to have the suits altered.
Mm-hmm.
Because even to go to a dry cleaner was money they didn't
Right.
have. I thought, could we create an industry where we would teach women who wouldn't have another option how to sew as a trade so they could learn to earn a living doing what you really loved and my mother loved? I have a friend who sews and I envy her because whenever she's down or something, she takes out her sewing machine and she works with her hands, and that takes you to a different place.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
It
something
is.
that saved my life. When I was in the worst places, I would just sit at my sewing machine, or I would make a pattern, or I would it's an art form, and every art form helps you, even writing, drawing, every art form just
Everything.
Creation in general, takes you.
Well, kudos to you for finding a way to work through a very, very difficult time of your life and to build something of it that you can give back to someone else.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me is a life well lived.
Yes.
I would, good for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good for you. Go for it. Don't let anybody talk you out of it.
No way.
Yeah. And tell us more about the fashionist culture trip that you're having in Milan.
Well, thank you. That came out, as you know, I organized other trips, but I'd contacted Elena Sisti. A friend of hers does tours of New York City, so they knew each other, and she put together some tours for me for various clients. Most of them were heritage tours, and she came up with this tour because I've always said I really always want people to understand that Italy has this incredible artistic heritage, but that's why we have Dolce Gabbana. This is why we have Missoni. This is why we have Gucci, and because that heritage is so inherent that they couldn't help but. So, in fact, it was the fashion industry that brought Italy back after the devastation of World War II. It was the marriage of the beautiful actress Linda Christian married Tyrone Power before your times. He was a very handsome man in Rome, and she wore a dress by the Fontana sisters. Well, it made the headlines. The Fontana sisters were known, and then they started to make all the dresses for movie stars, including Audrey Hepburn had her wedding dress there. And I found in my mother's closet a pair of Sorelle Fontana shoes. So even then, my mother, during the war, would go over. They opened this little store, even though there was a war going on. They learned in Paris. They came back to Rome. They opened the store. So I was just always intrigued by this. And Elena, who is not that much into fashion, but is very much into craftsmanship and art, put this together of a plan where you would go to Como and you would go to the silk mill and talk to the families who weave these fabrics and how these are started. And also, yes, you go to the major designers, but also some of the smaller houses. So you begin to see how this works through. And then you go to some of the local markets, but or go to Tortona to see the Armani Museum, or go into see the Last Supper. All of it is connected, and so we're very excited about it. It's time to start promoting it again. And another area of fashion I love because I spent so much time there is Florence. Florence to me is It's the Renaissance, it's the birth of humanism, and all these remarkable artisans along Via Santo Spirito or even hidden in San Frediano. In fact, in Florence now, you have a group called Female Artisans of Florence. During the pandemic, so many these little shops closed, so these women got together and they formed a collective, which is something you could do, Alexa. Is they formed this collective in this one space, and they feature different works of art. One woman was from Japan, learned leather making in Italy, so had handbags. One woman was from Britain, where she made these wooden eyeglasses, and they had her work. And then another woman is from Florence herself, and she does some beautiful silk prints. She prints on silk, and so it's wonderful. And you could expand into jewelry design as well, accessory design. Um, it's part of one of life's joys. So yeah, those two places.
It is, yeah. And it's interesting that in this country, we all came from somewhere at some point in time. And when you are talking about heritage, it's so important to recognize that the US is this melting pot, and it's funny, and I would ask you to tell the story of your parents with the melting pot and the baking soda.
I thought that was such an apt. Well, it's true. When we first came to the States, remember this was the 50s, so 53 on the Andrea Dorios. So being Italian wasn't so wonderful at the time. They even questioned our Mediterranean diet, which is so cool right now. Back then was questionable. The fact that we had our clothes made in Italy. Said you speak Italian at home correctly, which means you don't drop the vowel at the end of the word. You speak English outside correctly, you don't drop the G. You have to be the top of your class in English literature, in English grammar, and in American history. But at home, we live like Italians. We hold on to that. And I've held on to those traditions. And the theory was the melting pot that we'd all would come in. And my father and mother looked at me and they said, "We're not baking soda. We don't just blend in and disappear. We're like the ingredients that you put in the recipe," which is what America is that mixture. And I didn't understand it or appreciate it totally then, but I certainly do now. Now, over time, that point of view has helped me physically in terms of healthy habits, emotionally in terms of dealing with situation, and certainly professionally. Once you start, if you work internationally, you have to have an open mind to the cultures you visit, and you thank them. I'm sure Alexa thanks you quite a bit for the examples you've set, the challenges you've overcome, and how she has grown as a result.
Yeah, that's true. And what you're doing is amazing to hold on to the heritage
and to
teach others and to uphold and promote women.
All the time. That was my mother was always my mother was my first feminist icon. She was the only woman in our neighborhood who worked when we moved to Astoria, Queens. And she had to, because at the time my father was quite abusive and she had to find a way to keep the family together. And she worked in a factory, probably a sweatshop, but she would go out dressed in her heels and her lipstick and her dress because any work was honorable for her. And that spoke a lot. It's not how we treat the most privileged in our world. It's how you treat the people who do the jobs every day, working very hard to make our lives better. And she always had that appreciation, that sense. I give her a lot of credit. And my parents only had a 5th and an 8th grade education. And it was amazing how knowledgeable they were, how well read they were, and how much they advocated support for the arts, for reading. I have a lot to thank them for.
Yeah, that's true. And the love for books. I see that you have behind you books case and books. And we're traveling to Romania in 2 weeks. And my mother has a designated room
Library.
for a library and a wall full up to the ceiling with books.
Wonderful. Well, then I see that's why you became an author. That's why you're doing the work that you do. I still have my original copy of Little Women that I read in Toronto, Canada, where we first lived when I was 8 years old or whatever it was. Still have it. And also, if you're an immigrant in any way, when you immigrant to another country, books do the heavy lifting. Reading books, you're always in between when you're in a new country. You're always, and I still never feel part of one or the other. I feel like I'm always a little, but the books bring you into the place where you exist, the literature. Then all of a sudden you start to understand. You start to respect yourself, even with whatever differences you bring to the table. And books give you that. Little Women made me want to go to Boston, made me want to go to New England. And the Italian books I read kept me connected. So books serve a purpose. They do make us very introverted at times, but that's okay. You need that time as well.
Yeah, time for reflection, yes. And what is the book that you're working on right now?
Well, right now I don't know why I wanted to write about the hotels, because I've stayed in so many hotels because I traveled internationally on business. And then, so there will be separate stories, but the concept of home, the concept of transient homes, or a permanent home, or not having a home. So I think there will be clusters of fiction, nonfiction in there, exploring these motifs. And that's, so I go back and forth. And then I want to write a memoir on my mother's life. What I'd like to do is be more disciplined to make sure I get enough words on a page every day, which I confess I don't do. I wait for the inspiration. The inspiration doesn't always hit. So, as you know, you sit down and you write it.
That's how I feel being an artist. It hits, and sometimes it just runs dry. There's not a creative drop in my brain. I had that moment a few months ago. I was trying to come up with whatever, because we have a few events while we're in Romania, so I want to make some pieces for then so we can take pictures and we can have things to wear. And I was just blank. I was scrolling. I don't know if you know Pinterest. It's where they post a bunch of ideas. I was scrolling on Pinterest just endlessly. And nothing was happening. Nothing was happening. And I was like, okay, things find me when I'm not looking for them. The keys always come when you forget about them. So I said I'm just gonna stop thinking about it, and I'm just gonna work on what I know I need to do, and the rest will come. And eventually it did come.
Yeah.
The creative block.
There you go.
The dam opened.
It's surprising, isn't it, that somehow somebody once said that if you're a creative, you're always creating even when you think you're not, because it comes, it's interesting. You may think and it probably comes to you when you're riding your bike or doing something else where you can't write down or draw.
It always happens in the
right?
shower.
Yes, in the shower. That the best thoughts come then. So you don't. It's a tough one, but good for you. I hope to see pictures of the events that you design.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll send you some.
Yeah.
Please do.
And we launched last year the constructive escape movement. Is an idea where we gather people together and we create. And it's so amazing when I saw the ikebanas that you're doing and the classes that you're attending. And we were talking about how cool of an idea it is to incorporate that into the constructive escape movement.
Oh, that would be wonderful. That would be wonderful. You do those here in New York?
Yes.
Yeah. That would be wonderful. And I could definitely speak, or unless you want to speak directly to Christine, because to me it's such, well, first of all, it makes me do something with my hands. I don't have the gift my mother had, but it's a serene space. You walk in and it's a studio. It's on 18th Street. And on one side on the left are shelves with all the pottery. So you get to pick the vase. And then there are tables where you can work. And she gives you flowers to work with for the day. And we have a book. It's in Japanese with some English. And you follow the book and you work on certain styles. And then I play with it and then she always fixes it. And to because I loved Japan when I would go there on business years and years ago. I love the serenity, the calm, the sense of space that you use. And it's wonderful. All of a sudden now, if you're in the park and you look at a tree branch, it's beautiful to you. You don't miss the flowers, even though the flowers will be lovely, but you start to look at the shape of the branch and you think, my God, nature is pretty amazing.
Yeah. And creation in general, as I said, put your mind into a different space where somehow there is no worry. When you work with your hands, everything else in the mind disappears, vanishes somehow.
Yes. I think
All
that's
the
what it was for
focus
my mother.
goes to what you're doing with the hands. Yes.
Now, I envy people who are good with their hands. I have a friend who's like my mother. My mother had golden hands, but my friend Karen could do anything. She could make her own clothes. She could climb up a ladder and clean off her roof and change her and work on her car. We once had a funny story where they said they lived in California. She was up working on a roof in all these her working clothes. Then she came home, changed into her Chanel outfit, looking, and the guy didn't recognize her. The workers didn't know who she was because first she had her cap, but she just has that ability, is that focus to really try to figure out how to make something happen. And my mother did that too. She would rip things apart until it was perfect. So, but oh, yes, you enter that special place and you feel so relaxed when you leave.
Yeah. That's
Especially now with social media and the phones and as much as we try not to, there are days when I check more often than I need to, and
yeah.
I miss the days when we didn't have it. In a way, I love the good things such as this, but the fact that you're constantly looking and checking at this inanimate object
Yeah.
but then I love my pictures in there and I love that I can communicate overseas. We could do this. So it's like anything else in life.
Yeah. Find the
Moderation.
balance. Find the balance. Yes.
Yeah.
No, but it's true. The social media became so empty somehow, and we find a way to deny somehow our reality, and we escape into somebody else's life or something else that's shining over there. But as you said, creation is something that brings us back to where we are and
It does. Yeah.
to the present moment.
But at the same time, we can use social media for things like marketing for fashion.
Oh, clearly, again, social media and technology is wonderful.
Yeah.
But
In moderation.
finding the balance, right. To know where to stop when the marketing purpose ended.
Yes, it's knowing how to regulate it and control it and plan it just so you can feel like a human again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And all of these trips that you're doing in Italy are annual, or do you have more than one trip a year? Or I'm sure that you did food, you did culture,
Yeah.
you did all kinds of trips.
It could be something like 2 or 3 trips a year, and generally it would be people who would ask me to put together an individual itinerary for them. The group trip, the one that we had planned before the pandemic, that didn't happen. So now we're trying again with a theme trip. I'm thinking it should be mostly women because of the subject matter, but then there are some women who want to bring their husbands and who are interested. But I'm back and forth on that because I think it changes the dynamic. I really honestly do, but I'll see which way it goes and which direction it goes at this point. To me, to do 2 trips a year would be perfect, would be ideal. And if it's more than that, that's fine. What happens now with what I end up doing quite a bit is people ask me for tips and I just give them the tips and then they don't go on the trip, which is not a smart business move, obviously. But but at the end of the day, I just want people to go and enjoy. And we're just rethinking how we do some of the trips now going forward. Because these are very niche trips. It isn't like a general visit. And with Milan, it's interesting. A lot of people don't think to go to Milan. They would go to Rome, they would go to Florence. Milan tends to be to the side, unless you're in fashion, obviously, which would be the draw. So it doesn't immediately speak to them, but at the same time, Milan is a magnificent city, and the outskirts, because you would go to Como, you would go to Lago Maggiore, and that in of itself. So we'll see. We'll see where it goes the next year. And we may do an event over at Affordable Chic because you did your one event there. I'm sorry to have missed it. I was traveling.
No
And
worries.
otherwise I
No worries.
Next time.
Yeah, there will be more. There will be more.
Good. Please do, because I thought it was a really important theme, and I would love to have been there.
Yeah.
Bar none. And it's only 3 blocks away from me.
Oh, perfect.
Yes. West Side, it's great.
It's beautiful.
It's so much calmer than East Side.
Yes, it's much calmer. It's more residential, and we have the parks. And so, no, it's lovely. I mean, I've been here 40 years in this neighborhood, so it's probably grown with me. And it's just lovely. It's just very, and people are very, but all of New York. And New York is a fascinating city. It's got its issues like any other place, but like I say, nowhere in the world does the world come together the way it does in New York. The other day I jumped into a taxi because I was late and I was listening to this Italian fashion podcast. And I tried to lower it because the cab driver had. Next thing I know, he turns to me and starts speaking to me in Italian. Yeah, perfect Italian. Yeah, a man in his 40s probably. He was born in Ecuador. He left Ecuador, went to the UK for a while, then lived in Italy, and now is here. And we had a wonderful conversation about our individual immigrant experiences and how we like New York. But that could only happen in New York.
Yeah.
That's true,
Yeah. We were in the city today on the Lower East Side. And we parked the car because I had to pick up a sewing machine, my second sewing machine. And right next to where we parked the car, there was a couple sitting at the cafe speaking Romanian.
There you go. Did you start a conversation?
Oh, no, we were running around. It was.
Yeah.
But we always joke that we are everywhere. Romanians are everywhere.
Oh, as a matter of fact, when I worked for Prada Beauty, they'd launched a skincare line. Miuccia Prada loves skincare. She doesn't wear makeup, blah, blah, blah. And at one point, they wanted a good facialist. And I said, my friend Daniela Zaharia is from Romania. And Mrs. Prada said, yes, we need a Romanian.
Yeah.
She said, you find one of those because you're known for wonderful skincare. For many years. So, that's, I would go to her and she would understand my Italian and I would understand her Romanian because they're Romance languages. And so,
yeah, it's very close. Yes, it is.
well, they're beautiful, the Romance, all languages.
So now that we're approaching the end of the episode, there's a question that I ask every guest, and now I'm asking you. What is one activity in your life that makes you feel more alive?
I think, oh my gosh, there's so many. I think physical movement I know one of your interviewees spoke about dancing, and so I go to Albanelli and I do. It makes me feel very alive. Long, fast walks. You just being physically out there by myself in nature, and then always looking at a wonderful work of art. A wonderful work of art, a book. I think one time I felt very alive was when I was in South Africa. I was in Africa and I'd never been, and this sense expansive sky. So I think whenever I can be in motion and experiencing something new.
That's wonderful. The truth is that nature is something that makes us feel alive.
Yeah, it does. And you try to find it wherever you can, whether it's Central Park or by the river. But it's really essential for me, and for a lot of people. Or being by the water, by the ocean, even if you're not going in and you're walking around. And then physical movement, just walking, and then seeing people. If I'm having a bad day where I can't get to something, I go out and I see people and I interact briefly, and all of a sudden my spirits are lifted. Humanity
Yeah.
really takes us out of that, being around other humans in that regard, and even people you don't know and have never met. There's just, it wakes a spirit inside you. And yeah, that would be my recommendation.
Yeah. Gabriela, thank you so
Thank you so
much
much.
for
It's a
this
pleasure.
wonderful conversation. And I hope to see you at the summit, the Three Tomatoes
Oh,
meeting in May.
definitely going there, definitely. And anytime both of you are around, I would love to see you and take you for a really good Italian espresso.
Yes, of
Yes,
course.
that'd be amazing.
Okay, just let me know. I would love to
We'll
see you
do.
both in
We'll
person.
definitely schedule it.
Yes.
Look forward to it. Thank you so much, and congratulations, and really go forward, Alexa, with your initiative. I think it's really important.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, our listeners. And for more guests and more conversations, please subscribe and follow us. See you next week.